Hi everybody, welcome back to my little YouTube channel. If you're new to this channel, my name's Amanda. I'm a diagnosed autistic adult. I'm 41 years old. I was diagnosed with autism a few years ago. Having struggled all my life, I've always felt different to everybody else. I always describe the way I've felt as this little tiny piece of a jigsaw puzzle that just doesn't quite fit. You all know, if you've played jigsaw puzzles, when you get that one piece and you can't find where it goes. And a lot of autistic people will tell you that that's how we feel. We feel like we're not syncing with the world around us, and the world feels, we often describe it as an alien-like place. You have to excuse me, I've got hay fever, so if my nose is running, that's why, so please do excuse me. But we often feel like the world is an incredibly alien place to us, and we just don't quite fit in. And that's why you'll hear on Google, on YouTube, people saying we feel like aliens. It's not anything weird, it's just our way of describing how we feel. But in today's video, I want to talk about what happens during the autism assessment, and that is just my experience. I've done a video previously to this, but I think a lot of people are wondering whether they could be indeed autistic and have a lot of anxiety and fears surrounding going or even informing the GP or healthcare provider, or even family and friends, that they think they might be autistic. And so they have a lot of anxiety surrounding the assessment procedure itself, and it really is nothing to worry about. Don't forget, when you go for an autism assessment, the assessors are dealing with autistic people all the time. So you're really in good hands. They really do get us. So what happens during an autism assessment in the United Kingdom, and this is based on my experience only, so obviously it's going to be different for everybody else. Let's find out. So before we get going, I want to talk a little bit about what autism is. For those people that are just newly tuned into the channel, they might be employers out there or family and friends wanting to support a loved one and just want to learn more about autism. So autism is a neurodevelopmental condition. It's a genetic condition. That means that we're born with it. It's in our genetic makeup. It's usually passed on through a parent or via one of the immediate members of your family. There are no vaccines for autism. There's no one pill cures all for autism. It is a genetic condition. So it's with us from birth and it's with us until we pass, essentially. So we have it all the time. A lot of autistic people can be really good at something called masking, that's hiding or camouflaging our autistic traits, and it can give the appearance that we've grown out of autism, and that's not the case. It's just that we've got more we've adapted more to the society around us, and we're able then to disguise our symptoms in order to come across as being non-autistic and to fit in. So it's a genetic condition and it's neurodevelopmental, which means that it affects our minds, our brains. It's within our genetic makeup. It affects the way we see the world, the way we hear the world, the way we interpret the world, the way we communicate with other people and the world around us in general. And so as a result, coming back to what I've previously said, it can feel like an incredibly foreign alien planet to us. As much as we can come across as being okay or like anybody else, the world itself can be incredibly confusing to us. So you might be wondering, have I got autism? And if you think you've got autism and you're thinking about going for an autism assessment, you might be thinking, well, I know that now, I know about my signs and symptoms, the signs and symptoms fit, so how would I go about obtaining a diagnosis? The first thing that I would advise you to do is to speak to your GP or your healthcare provider or hospital, or even a support worker or a loved one that's caring for you, and just discussing that why you're feeling that way. That you can do something called an autism quotient questionnaire. It's a free autism questionnaire online. If you type into Google autism questionnaire, and it should be free, go for one that's free, you can fill that in. It's usually about 20 to 25 questions. It asks you all sorts of things similar to what the neurodevelopmental team will ask you, but they go into much more detail, obviously. And at the end of that, it should tell you whether you score highly for autism or you score low for autism and you might not have autism. It's really good to do that, because then you can take that information, you can present it to your GP, and the GP can then say yes or no, we think you do or you don't have autism, and they can get the ball rolling with regards to an autism referral. Now, a doctor at a GP practice isn't able to diagnose you there and then with autism. It requires a psychiatrist or a psychologist to be able to properly diagnose you with autism, and the referral pathway can sometimes be a long wait. I waited just over 3 years for my assessment and for my diagnosis, and indeed when you go for your autism assessment, the assessment appointment can sometimes be up to 3 hours long. So So it's an incredibly long assessment process. It's not something where you go in for a 10-20 minute appointment and you're questioned and then you're diagnosed. That you've literally asked a series of questions, and they really delve into your childhood and into your life to make a diagnosis, because don't forget, it's important that they put a correct diagnosis for us on our lives, because it's going to affect us then for the rest of our lives in terms of employment, education, relationships. So the assessment process can be quite lengthy. So sometimes with the waiting list being like over 3 years I waited for it, it can feel like a painful wait, an incredibly long time to wait. And a lot of autistic people, I know myself, I got to the point where I hit crisis point where I'd felt so different for so many years. I felt like I didn't fit in for so long that I ended up going for an assessment for autism, and the waiting list then was so long, and within those 3 years I was going through what's known as autistic burnout, which I'll discuss in another video. And you can be thinking, well, what do I do while I'm waiting for my appointment, because it's such a long time and I'm hitting burnout and I'm hitting crisis point. And there are things you can do. The doctor or the nurse can refer you to things for like counselling and cognitive behavioural therapies. That doesn't suit me, and I know it doesn't suit a lot of autistic people, and that's simply because our minds are wired differently to somebody that doesn't have autism. So questions that are tailored to non-autistic people might not be appropriate for autistic people, because we interpret them differently. We have delays in response to communication, to questions that are being asked of us. We might give inappropriate responses back or confusing responses back. And so a lot of cognitive behavioural therapies, for example, need to be tailored to autistic people, in my opinion. So, but you can, if you're wanting to have counselling and you're somebody that's happy with that, then you can ask your GP for referrals onto those services, and the GPs are usually really accommodating and really happy to help. But in the meantime, checking out YouTube videos, that's what I did. I joined Facebook, and I joined loads, about 15-20 autism community sites on Facebook. And as soon as I did that, and I saw posts from other people, and I interacted with other people, and people started sending me email messages, and I was messaging them back and forth, discussing our symptoms and our signs and how we cope with life. And still to this day, we still discuss and communicate with each other on Facebook, on email every day. It's felt like a weight's been lifted off my shoulder, because I no longer feel like I'm on my own. So just joining Facebook, going on some of the autism support websites, and going on YouTube and looking at some of the autism videos that are made by different creators can just be an invaluable source of information and really help with your mental health. So you might be wondering then, what happens after the GP's referred you on? Now, the first thing that will happen in the UK anyway is the neurodevelopmental team, that's the autism team, it's called a neurodevelopmental condition, will send you a little document in the post, and I think it's around about 8 pages long. Don't hold me to that, I can't remember, it was a few years ago. It asks you loads of questions. It asks you about your current symptoms, why you think you're autistic, most importantly, why do you want to get a diagnosis? Why have you come to the point in your life where you feel like a diagnosis is needed, and how will it benefit you? And that's a really important one, because often a lot of people will say, because we want to understand ourselves better, because we've felt different, we felt like alien beings on another worldly planet in the nicest possible way. The world has felt foreign to us, so we just want to understand ourselves better, don't we, on a world that just feels so incredibly difficult. And it'll ask you things like your childhood, how did you play and interact with other children of your age when you was younger, coming on to your adolescence and adulthood, about jobs and maintaining jobs and employment, whether you've had any difficulties in employment, whether you've had disciplinary sanctions, whether you've been in and out of a job or not been able to maintain full-time employment, for example, whether you've struggled with communication, whether you've struggled to understand sarcasm and jokes and all that sort of stuff, whether you've had any relationships with other people, and whether those relationships have come into any problems and relationships have broke down, and whether you're single as a result. And it'll ask you all sorts of different questions pertaining to your childhood, to your adolescence, into your adulthood, depending on your age. And then you send that back, And if they think that once they've looked at that you are autistic, they'll then send you for a face-to-face appointment. So when you do get sent for your face-to-face autism appointment, sometimes it's a good idea to take a parent with you or a guardian with you, somebody that's known you from a young age, somebody that's known you from childhood, from when you was a baby. Now I know that we're not all in the privileged position to have that, or maybe there might be people that don't trust their family and friends enough to do that, and that's fair enough. You don't have to take anybody with you, but if you're in a position where you are able to take a parent or guardian or a loved one in with you that's known you from a baby, for example, it can be invaluable in terms of information for the assessor, because they can ask those guardians and loved ones questions about you that you may have forgot or you can't remember because you was too young. With regards to your childhood, how did you interact with other people? They'll be looking at things, really important things, like when you was a toddler, when you was a child and mum brought Barbie to you or Action Man to you to play with, did you take Barbie or Action Man off them, and did you reciprocate that play? Did you both play together? Did I want to play with mum or did I want to play with dad? Or did I just ignore them and pretend that they didn't exist and they wasn't there? And that happened with me. Oftentimes my mum or dad would try and initiate play with me, and I just would completely ignore them as if they didn't exist, and I'd just play on my own. And the same goes with the last few things, like interacting with your friends at school. Did your friends, when they initiated play, did you reciprocate that, and did they also did you play back with them? And that's again something I used to isolate myself as a child. A lot of autistic people, we tended to sort of spend more time on our own in comparison to being around groups of people, and preferred solitude in comparison to team situations and playing in parks and playing in the playground with other school kids. And so these sort of questions will be pertinent to some of the things that they ask at the assessment. So the assessor will also ask you things like your past medical history. So take a prescription with you, take a list of all of your medical information. They should have that already from your GP, but it's sometimes just a good idea even just to write it down on a little document, a little piece of A4 paper, and then you don't get tongue-tied. If you're anything like me, when you go into an appointment, you get anxiety, and your mind can just shut off when people start asking you questions. It happens to me often. My mind just shuts down. I can't seem to process it enough because there's too much going on, along with all of the sensory things and the anxiety. So just jotting down your past medical history, anxiety, depression, what medication you're on, duloxetine, sertraline, whatever it might be, amitriptyline, whatever medication you're on, and then you can just tell them and give them a detailed report, because they'll be looking at that and looking at whether you've been previously diagnosed with, say, anxiety disorders, because a lot of autistic people are diagnosed with anxiety disorders or depressions, or even things like bipolar disorders, before they're actually picked up with autism. So it can give the assessor a good indication, and it builds up a picture, a past medical picture, past medical history, and it sort of it paints a description of what's been going on in your childhood through to your adolescence and to your adulthood. And then what a lot of people want to know is, will the assessor tell you on the day whether you have autism? I can only speak for myself, and that's yes. She said to me, would you like to know whether you're autistic now, or do you want me to send it you as a written document? And they do both indeed, if that's what you want. They'll send you a written document anyway. But I wanted to know, if you're anything like me, you'll want to know, am I autistic? Why do I feel this way? We've waited so long, we just want answers, don't we? And she said to me, yes, I'd scored highly on the assessment, and I was indeed autistic. And then after that, she sent me a copy of the document, the diagnosis, and it lists some of the struggles that you have and some of the things that you're better able to cope with. And that's really invaluable, a really invaluable piece of information, because then if you're working for an employer, you can take that information to your employer, to the occupational health department, and they then should put something in place called a reasonable adjustment. Now, a reasonable adjustment I will do a separate video on. A reasonable adjustment is something where employers in the United Kingdom and globally back can only speak for the UK, have to by law put some changes in place, some accommodations in place. They're usually free and cost effective and don't cost the departments anything. And they have to put little changes in place, such as being able to work on your own, for example, having dim lights when you're working. So you can see these things are usually free, they don't cost a fortune, in order to allow us to work as effectively as somebody that doesn't have autism. Say, for example, a colleague that doesn't have autism. So some of the benefits of having an official diagnosis and having that official document is that we're covered under something called the Equality Act 2010. That's in the United Kingdom, and that just covers us from disability discrimination and victimisation, some of those things unfortunately that autistic people can face in the workplace. Not every workplace, a lot of employers are the most incredible employees in the world, but it does help, a diagnosis does help just to build a foundation for your employer to put in place reasonable adjustments so that you can work more effectively. And then before we finish off, the assessor, when you sit in for your appointment, will probably likely tell you that after the assessment it might not be autism, and don't feel disheartened if they say that to you. It can sometimes feel like, I've waited all this time and now you're telling me it might not be autism, so what's wrong with me, in the nicest possible way. But it could be that because autism can manifest as lots of different medical problems, anxieties, depressions, even sociopathies, for example. It can look like a lot of different things due to empathy problems and all that sort of all that sort of stuff that manifests alongside autism symptoms. It might be that it's not autism, it is another medical condition, and of course it's a psychologist that's assessing you, so they're able to make a clinical diagnosis, and regardless of what medical condition you're diagnosed with, you'll still then be covered once you've got a diagnosis under the Equality Act 2010. I hope this video has helped put your mind at ease a little bit with regards to the autism assessment process. It really is nothing to worry about. You're in safe hands. My assessment, I think it took about an hour and a half, 2 hours, thereabouts, can't quite remember. Sometimes the assessment can be up to like 3 hours, maybe sometimes longer. It's different for children. I can't speak for children, so that'll be, if you're wanting to know about what happens for children during the autism assessment, that's obviously going to be a separate video. You'll have to look at somebody else's YouTube video for that. And of course, just because I've had my assessment my way and experienced it my way doesn't mean to say you're going to experience it the same. So, you know, don't take my word for granted, but I hope it's put your mind at rest a little bit. If you do think that you might be autistic, do speak to your GP. The GPs are usually really supportive, and they can get the ball rolling then with regards to referring you on for an official autism diagnosis. Take care everybody, and I shall see you next time for my next one.